You're listening to the Dynamic Thinking Project podcast. This is episode 13, and today's topic is conformity. Hey everyone, Adam Muselli here. Welcome to the Dynamic Thinking Project podcast. If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. This podcast is released every Friday, and show notes are found at the website, themindtechinstitute.com. It's all one word. Come back often and feel free to add this podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. All links are in the show notes and website. And now, let's get into the show. As some previous episodes, I'm also gonna start this episode with a short disclaimer. This episode may cause some people to feel uncomfortable, especially those who chose to pass their lifetime living day to day just as the rest of the 7.5 billion people, whom most of them conform to everything they see, hear and know, just as the rest of the herd. So I do apologize in advance if you feel upset or offended in any way. But of course, and as usual, I'm not sorry for opening your eyes on something maybe you're doing unconsciously and never been aware of consciously. And I assure you, if you keep an open mind till the end of this episode, you'll start looking at your life and the way you think and behave differently. And once again, I am not your enemy. Now, if you have been following this podcast, you would know by now what conformity is. However, if you haven't yet, this is what conformity briefly and basically means, or as we say in NLP, the big picture. Conformity basically means altering your behavior to match that of people around you or the norms. Conformity is like going with the flow. You're just doing or thinking what others are doing or thinking. So you don't feel you're left behind or feeling awkward amongst the group. It simply means you're going along with the herd without critical thinking or forming your own opinion or something that contradicts the norm or the masses. This technique has been used on the masses since the Nazis, starting propagandas as it's still happening in politics, religions, or any other system, or isms, as well as in advertisements and marketing. So from the dawn of time, man sought approval from his peers. Imitating each other was a means of survival, and instinct has prevailed today. But what's the limit, and how far are we willing to go? Well, let's see how far we can go in this episode. In the wake of the Second World War, the world was stunned by the German people's adoptions of Hitler's horrific vision of the Aryan race or the Aryan purity. At that time, some psychologists set out to discover the mechanism of social control and social engineering. Among those was Gestalt therapist Solomon Asch. He conducted one of the most famous studies in the early 1950s. The study was based on two cards, one on the left and one on the right. The card on the left was called standard card, had a vertical line printed on it, and the line was of a certain length in measurement. The second card on the right had three printed lines on it, each card with a different length, and only one of the three lines matches the length of the card on the left, which is the standard card. The subjects were asked, which of the three lines matched the single line on the first card? And, of course, to build peer pressure, Ash had arranged for some volunteers to give wrong answers before the other subjects did. Despite the obvious answer of which of the three lines matched the single line on the first card, the subjects denied the evidence of their own eyes and yield to group influence. They went along with the group for different reasons. each one of the subjects must have thought as the rest of the group must be right, and only one in this group who isn't seeing what they are seeing. The subjects genuinely believed that the group were correct and answered what the group said, knowing they were wrong. But the subjects conformed to the rest by either genuinely believing the group were correct or they didn't want to stand out and feel awkward. Half a century later, psychiatrist and neuroscientist Gregory Burns updated Ash's study in 2005. He found almost identical results. Despite the seeming simplicity of the task, 3 out of 5 subjects actually agreed with an incorrect answer by volunteers at least once. 1 in 4 subjects agreed with the wrong answer 50% of the time. Now, while you might think you make your own decisions all on your own when it comes to peer pressure, all too often your brain is just following the crowd. It's all around you every day as an invisible force, affecting you and affecting what you do, affecting how you think and who you are. This is called social conformity, peer pressure, and social control. You see, we are wired in a way that social pressure often causes us to change our picture of reality. Social conformity and fitting in feels good, even at the cost of our otherwise good sense. But how do we give up critical thinking? What are the root causes of our mindless conformity? And what are the consequences of conforming to negative trends? Let's start first with the how do you give up critical thinking. There is a social experiment was conducted by National Geographic and filmed as a documentary, in which a volunteer group is tasked to lead a single individual into following an irrational act of standing up upon hearing a beep. Interestingly, it just took few minutes for the individual to not only get to conform, but also to start leading other unaware individuals into standing up at the beep. Even the hard-headed ones who initially resisted to some extent started to follow the extent of synchronization. You see, while conformity might not sound like a good thing, but it's actually not so bad if you used it to, let's say, join others to do good things in this world. For example, joining rational others to produce other alternatives that aren't controlled by the system, for example, such as free energy, as what Nikola Tesla was working on and actually finished more than a century ago, rather than just keep using fossil fuel while we already have the alternatives more than a century ago. Also, conformity can be good if you conform to those who refuse to join the sheeple, as sheep/people, sheeple, to go to war and to destroy other nations in the name of false freedom. However, that's not what we see these days. Unfortunately, the majority of us is in constant loss of leading or following negative trends simply because our brain craves synchronicity. And it takes comfort and the ease and efficiency we go with the flow, whether simply knowing what to wear in the morning, supporting your favorite team, which they don't even know that you exist, getting ready for work, even marching off to war. We are programmed to be part of the group. And that's because our brain knows that there is power in numbers, and survival lies in being with the crowd. Jonah Brigger of the University of Pennsylvania explains how our brains function. He says, this sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps. You see, it's interesting to note that the National Geographic experiment, where they beep a sound and everyone started to stand up, there was no rewards involved for those who followed. There was no punishment for not following, and there is no promotion to entice. There were no family traditions to force, and there were no cultural norms to respect. Despite all that, in the second part, where the group are all gone and the lady who was the subject, everyone mindlessly followed a single individual who did not even know what she was doing. Compare this experiment with the society in which we live in, where there are punishments for not following, where there are promotions to entice into following certain trends, where there are cultural norms that we have to respect. It's not easy to avoid being conformed and avoid social pressure. The question is, what influences our sense of conformity the most? And how can we avoid that? The first reason for our mindless conformity is the countless organized forces in society, from incentives to the fear of visible and invisible punishment, that constantly shape our opinion and keep us from critical thinking. The second reason for our mindless conformity is that we are not absolutely free in life. If there were absolutely no prohibition, then yes, we would absolutely be free. For example, if you were absolutely free, you would be able to go and kill anyone without any consequences. And also, our victims won't be able to retaliate because that would jeopardize our freedom. Well, the question is, why should victim have no freedom at all? That's why it would be horrible if we are absolutely free. Since human nature cannot coincide with the notion of absolute freedom, we start conforming to invisible social pressures as well as submitting to anything we assume would shape our lives as a result. The third reason is that when someone holds a different opinion than the rest, the anterior cingulate cortex in our brain produces an error signal which tries to fix that by modifying our opinion to be in line with the group, even if its a viewpoint isn't uncomfortable or totally wrong. And this because we want to stay safe by staying with the herd, by staying with the group. You see, this nexus lose our power to think critically. We don't question, we don't analyze, we just believe that what's happening around us is perfectly normal. We take things at face value, the superficiality of the situation, rather than the depth and reason in it. We thus become mentally enslaved. So, how dangerous can conformity be? Or how dangerous can conformity become? Well, regardless how you look at it, it is dangerous enough, and the minimal outcome is losing who you are. And as a maximum outcome is maybe destroying the world. Here's an example of a minimal outcome. Here in the West and other countries, we're often being called maybe once in a lifetime to something called jury duty, where the citizens of the country play a role in the justice system, which it allow members of the community to play a role in the administration of justice. Now, I want you to just listen to me and imagine what I'm saying, so you'll be able to fathom what I'm saying as a reality. Let's say you're sitting with a jury group where there is a verdict to be taken towards or against someone who might be totally innocent, by the way. What would you do if the group said guilty? Would you just conform to them while you're under oath and maybe a person's life is on the line? Or would you form your own critical thinking and maybe disagree with the herd? And that's called counterconformity. As you see, sometimes conformity can go really bad, especially when it's formatted or engineered in a form of propaganda. And I will certainly cover the propaganda subject in a separate episode since it's a very, very long subject. But briefly, usually propagandas are designed based on psychological and mind control techniques called spins and anchors. And actually, there used to be called spin doctors whoever designed them, such as Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. Now, spin doctors are called PRs, and we teach that in our online neurolinguistic programming training, but at least an ethical form of it. I also have a whole segment in our book, The Day We Gave Up Health, talking about propaganda and how it's used in the health system and the food industry. You see, when a propaganda is in action and people are conforming to it, this behavior may lead to the maximum outcome, which is destroying the world. Think of the Holocaust and other genocide around the world, where millions of innocent people brutally died because of conformity. I mean, there is an experiment called the Milgram experiment, shows that people obeying commands feel less responsible for their actions. And of course, obeying commands is a form of conformity, since critical thinking would be on holiday. Well, the Milgram experiment was conducted by Stanley Milgram, a Yale University psychologist. He tested whether ordinary people would inflict harm on another person after following orders from an authority figure. Well, shockingly, the results suggested that any human was capable of a heart of darkness. I believe the experiment was conducted because of the 1962 letter as a last-ditch effort of clemency for the Holocaust organizer Adolf Eichmann, when he wrote that he and other low-level officers were forced to serve as mere instruments, shifting the responsibility for the death of millions of Jews and other ethnic groups to his superiors. The just following orders defense, made famous in the post-World War II Nuremberg trials, presented heavily in the Eichmann's court's hearing. But he was hanged, I believe, in the same year, 1962, in Israel. Well, the point is, the Milgram experiment shows that people are obeying commands as, of course, conforming to authorities, feel less responsible for their actions. I hope you learned something important today, which is to form your own opinion. Not just follow where the herd is going, whether in religion, politics, groups, club, cult, or whatever it is. We are different than animals because we are capable of critical thinking. There has been always conspiracy in keeping the masses in a state of conformity, and of course in obedience, to follow the herd and not to question authorities. Thank you for listening. The Dynamic Thinking Project podcast is released every Friday. If you have any questions, you can email me. The email is on our website, themindtechinstitute.com. It's all one word. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, take care and enjoy your weekend. This is Adam Musalli, signing out.